Hi, and welcome to today's Coffee with Cobb. Today we will be going over one of the most dreaded phrases in any IT department, disaster recovery. In this 30-minute webinar, we'll cover what disasters may be lurking around the corner, how to prepare for them, and the technology that makes disaster recovery possible. In the event of a disaster, there are quite a few options available to your business in terms of recovery, such as cyber liability insurance. In this webinar, however, we will cover the main component of technology that makes disaster recovery possible, backups. With us today is Jeff Blunt, our VCIO, who has had over 10 years of experience in the industry, and Kate Vintage, me, our digital content manager. And with that, let's get started. Before we really jump into today's Coffee with Cobb, we're going to quickly cover something called Murphy's Law, and that simply states that anything that can happen will happen. Now, there are a lot of disasters that can strike your network. We're going to cover 3 types of different disasters in this Coffee with Cobb, starting with natural disasters. These disasters can include hurricanes, storms, tornadoes, earthquakes, and even squirrels. If you look over there on the right, you can see that photo, and those are acorns falling out of a communications tower. Squirrels are known to put acorns where they shouldn't be and to chew on power lines, so they can cause catastrophic damage to the infrastructure that makes your network run. Next up on our list of disasters that your network can face are physical disasters. And these include power outages, broken equipment, and even ISP failure. Now, when we talk about broken equipment, we're specifically talking about the infrastructure that is in your office, such as the switches, the routers, and even the server itself that makes your network run. Lastly, we have cyber disasters. Now, there's a lot that can go wrong in the digital realm, but today we're going to mostly focus on ransomware. And to cover ransomware in more detail, Jeff is going to take it away.
Thank you, Kate. Appreciate that. So ransomware and phishing is something we've covered pretty extensively throughout previous Coffee with Cobb segments. So we record all of those and they are available on our website. So I encourage you to go check those out. There's some great information there, and it's a really good resource for you to educate yourself on those topics. There's a good reason that we continue to talk about ransomware and phishing emails. A recent statistic says that over 60% of phishing attempts are successful in some way. And if you're in any sort of sales role or in a marketing role or something along those lines, if you were able to have 60% success rate whenever you're trying to reach somebody, just to return a phone call or open up an email that you sent to them, you'd be doing backflips over that rate. So you can clearly see why the cyber criminals really love these phishing emails that ultimately typically lead to some sort of ransomware attack. So what exactly is ransomware? In the end, it ultimately locks you out of your files. It doesn't move the files, it doesn't delete the files, it just makes it so that you are not able to open them until you get the key from the hackers. So typically whenever ransomware attack has happened on a network, again, you'll be able to see all your files there, you just can't open them. And at that point, the attacker will let you know that, hey, we've encrypted all of your files, we have the key, you need to contact us, and we'll let you know how much you need to pay us to get the key to unlock your files. It's a pretty sophisticated attack, and it's a very popular attack. Email and phishing emails are the most popular way that this starts. One thing I will say, obviously we're talking about backups and disaster recovery today, and that is a piece of being able to recover from a disaster like ransomware. But as Kate mentioned earlier, there is a whole lot more to ransomware that you really should have involved if you do have an attack like that, specifically contacting your cyber liability insurance company. But as we've said, ransomware is certainly one of those disasters that a good backup or disaster recovery solution can really help save the day on.
Now, luckily, there is a single solution for all of these would-be disasters, and those are backups. Backups are a great way to prevent disaster from crippling your business's operations. While backups don't stop disaster from occurring, they do allow you to quickly recover. Backups are essentially a snapshot of your entire server, and this includes the files, the programs, and the settings that create your network as you know it right now. What's really cool about backups is they are available for both on-site and cloud servers, and it's a mix and match scenario. So let's say that your business uses an on-site server, but you want to make sure that your network is as robust as possible. You can back up that server in the cloud. Or conversely, if you have a cloud server that you usually use in your daily operations, you can have an on-site backup server in case you want to make sure that you always have access to that server no matter what happens. And to talk more in depth about backups, Jeff is going to go ahead.
Yeah, so the technology behind your backups, can be very intricate depending on the solution that you need for your organization or your particular instance. Let's take a look at a little bit how backup servers work. As Kate stated, a backup is a snapshot of your entire server, or potentially even some workstations, depending on needs. Within this snapshot, there's several different options of robustness. So the way we kind of help a client determine, what are your needs, what sort of backup solution should you have, and the investment that you potentially need to make in a backup solution. There's two terms that we really talk about a lot, RTO and RPO. So recovery time objective is at the point that a disaster happens, how much time needs to go by, or how much time would you prefer to go by before you are back up and running to some sort of degree? At least being able to access the internet again, or get to your files, or maybe be able to send an email or something along those lines. Is that time an hour? Is that time a day? Is that time a week? So what is the time objective to be back up and running? Recovery point objective, RPO, is how far back in time do we need to recover from? So how much potential data loss are you willing to accept? Is that I only want to lose up to an hour, again, a day, a week? How much time how often do we need to take backups? And the answer to those two questions right there, most of the time is, well, as little as possible. But of course, then whenever you start looking at the costs for a solution that would match those RTO and RPO objectives, then the budgetary numbers on that sometimes start to take over and say, all right, well, maybe we can go a day, or maybe we can go a week, just depending on, are we backing up a server? Are we backing up a workstation? There's different objectives depending on what the situation is. One other thing that sometimes some people kind of get a little confused on, RAID stands for Redundant Array of Independent Disks. Some people say, well, I've got a RAID in my server, I don't think I need a backup, right? And that's not exactly true. One of the things that makes a server different from a standard workstation or standard desktop at an employee's desk is the redundancy built into that server, and RAID is one of those things. RAID deals specifically with the hard drives that are in the server. So let's just say that there's 3 hard drives built into the server. if you save a Word document, to a shared folder or shared drive on the server there, that Word document essentially gets broken up into 3 different pieces. So a piece of it will get on drive A, a piece will get on drive B, and a piece will get on drive C. And using some simple math, if drive C dies, well, we can figure out what was there because we have A and B. And that's, obviously it's a little more complex than that, but just the high level overview, that's kind of what RAID is about. And there is some redundancy built into those servers, but it does not replace a good solid backup solution. Last thing I'll talk about here, Kate mentioned, cloud servers and on-site servers. It's great to have servers in the cloud. Again, depending on the situation, that may be the best thing for you. But just because you have servers in the cloud doesn't mean that you don't need a backup to back up your files and applications and things. And just because there's a server in the cloud doesn't mean that a virus that's on your local network can't affect that server that's in the cloud. So regardless of where you have your applications or your servers, it's always good to implement some sort of backup and disaster recovery solution.
Thanks, Jeff. So last thing that we're going to talk about is redundancy and robustness. Now, it's important to know that backups aren't the end-all be-all. And you need to make sure that your network is firstly robust. The simplest way to do this is to create an environment that runs in the cloud, which allows your organization to work in a decentralized fashion. And what this really means is when you have a application that runs in the cloud, for example, let's say that a hurricane or a tornado strikes the location where your office is. If you have a server that runs in the cloud and your employees are able to work from home either on a laptop or a mobile device using applications that run in the cloud, you can still work pretty much at 100% efficiency. So whenever you're thinking about what should be our next move in terms of software or even the infrastructure that makes your network work, always consider going towards a decentralized option because it will make your network stronger. Backups will definitely help speed up the process, but it is important to note, as Jeff was talking about with the RTO and RPO, that backups are a granular process. And like he said, you can actually have access to your email client before you have access to something like QuickBooks. So building a redundant and robust network is the best way to ensure that you at least have a solid foundation in case disaster does strike. But backups are always a great way to, as their namesake says, back up everything. And with that, that is the end of the presentation portion of today's Coffee with Cobb. So we will go ahead and open up the floor to questions. And if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat, and we will be waiting here to answer them. So while we're waiting here, Jeff, backups are a pretty interesting thing in general, especially when it comes to terms of the cost of backups. Would you like to speak a bit more about what you need to consider in terms of the economics of your backups?
Certainly. We mentioned, there's an option for a snapshot of your entire server. Like you said, it's not just the files and folders, but it's the applications that are installed, the configuration of your server. Clearly, because that's a little more complex and a much shorter RTO and a much shorter RPO, the costs around that are going to be more significant than if you did just a more simple file backup, if you just back up your files or just back up your folders. However, depending on your situation, depending on your needs, you may just need a file backup. It all depends on your budgetary needs, what your situation is, how much your business can sustain maybe an extended amount of downtime. So really, whatever your budget is, there's probably some sort of backup solution there available for you. So even if you've got a really small budget, I would highly encourage you to get some kind of backup going. Just so, like you mentioned Murphy's Law earlier, it's really not a if this is going to happen, it's really more of a when.
Definitely. And actually, on that vein, we did have a question come in. Do cloud backups or on-site backups cost more?
It's really all over the place. And I don't think it really depends on whether it's in the cloud or whether it's on site. It really kind of more depends on what type of RTO and RPO objectives there are. Again, just a file or folder level backup is going to be less expensive, whereas the full snapshot is going to be a little bit more. I guess I probably could say if you are going to do some sort of cloud backups, then most likely there's going to be some sort of subscription costs, because that data has to sit somewhere, and you've got to buy or pay for the space for that data to stay in a data center somewhere or in the cloud somewhere. So I guess to directly answer the question, cloud backups would be a little bit more expensive, but again, the higher degree of the cost is going to be whether it's file level backup or a full image or full snapshot.
Awesome. We've got another question here. We have an on-site server, and we're working on digitizing thousands of paper documents. What can we do to help mitigate any potential disasters? Mostly concerned about something that could hit both the server and the physical documents.
Yeah, the physical documents obviously are what's the word I'm looking for? Very vulnerable. Physical disasters, fire, flood, tornado. I mean, imagine if a tornado hit the building and those physical paper documents are scattered miles away. It's obviously would be very difficult to recover from that. The question says, we're working on digitizing thousands of paper documents. Get that done as soon as possible to help mitigate those physical papers, potentially being damaged in some way. With a server, like if you have a physical server in your, in a closet somewhere or in a network room in the office, the cloud, a cloud backup or a cloud solution is a great way for that. And again, these snapshot solutions that are out there can take a snapshot of that server and send it up to the cloud. And in the event that something physically happened to the server room or something physically happened to the server itself, you could turn on that server in the cloud and have your network still running while you repair whatever happened to the server. So there's a solution out there for almost any need. Again, it really all just comes down to what your budgeting numbers are and what you can sustain as far as your recovery time and your recovery point.
Awesome, thanks, Jeff. So just a reminder, if you do have any questions, we've got a couple minutes left in this Coffee with Cobb segment, so feel free to go ahead and post them in the chat. While we're waiting, in case anyone does have any more questions, I was wondering, could your backup server itself actually, for example, be infected with ransomware?
It can, and I feel like a little bit of a broken record here because I keep on referencing, budget and all those sort of things. The lower level file level and folder backups tend to be vulnerable to those sort of things. If you were to get a ransomware attack on a computer or a server, and there's just a simple external hard drive plugged into that doing a backup, chances are that backup is also going to be encrypted. And in that instance, your backup and disaster recovery plan is kind of out the window. So these are all things that you really kind of need to think about and talk about with your IT group or your IT provider, and just get a better understanding of what's the best way to protect yourself.
Great. So we do have 5 more minutes. So last call for any questions. And if we didn't get a chance to answer your question today, you can always reach out to us at coffee@cobbtechnologies.com. You can also find a recording of this episode on cobbtechnologies.com. But we just had a question pop up. Is cloud backup preferable for recovery when you need to spin up replacement servers, i.e. virtual servers?
I wouldn't say cloud backup is preferable, because if you really think about it, if you've got a snapshot of an entire server that is saved in the cloud somewhere, to be able to spin that up, there's the potential that you may need to download a copy of that snapshot, and that could be a very, very large file. And depending on the speed and the size of your internet connection, the time it takes to download that file could be a couple of hours, maybe even a whole day. Again, depending on your internet speed. Again, depending on what type of solution you have, you could spin up that server in the cloud right where it sits, right where the backup sits. And in that instance, it would be very fast. You would be able to spin up the cloud, within an hour of some sort of disaster. So, I mean, to answer the question, I wouldn't say it's preferable to have it in the cloud, but for complete redundancy and complete robustness that Kate was talking about, it's probably best to have an on-site copy and a cloud copy of any sort of backups that you have.
Thanks, Jeff. So as I was saying, if you do have any questions that we didn't get a chance to answer, you can always reach out to us at coffee@cobbtechnologies.com. And a recording of this episode will be available tomorrow on cobbtechnologies.com under the Coffee with Cobb archives. We want to apologize for the short delay at the beginning of this episode. Thank you for sticking with us. We really appreciate it. And as always, thank you for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you at the next one. Thank you so much and have a good day.